Hey, this is going to be exciting. We're about to interview a real, live anarchist. I'm not kidding. So I think we have our connection now to this real, live anarchist, presumably hiding in some anti-government compound somewhere. Real, live anarchist, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Wow. And are you really and truly an actual anarchist?
Yes, I am.
And are you... wait a second, I'm being told that we have some problems with the audio and video connection. Well, we'll just keep going and see what happens. Now, to protect your identity, how about if I just call you Anarchist X?
Well, you could just call me Tessa.
Tessa? Is that some secret code name, like an acronym for terrorist, extremist, scary...
No, it's just my name, Tessa Rose.
Oh. Okay. Well, let's see. I have a few questions here. Number one, do you prefer pipe bombs or Molotov cocktails?
I don't know anything about either, and I don't have any use for either.
Oh. Well, what's the most recent terrorist action you participated in?
I've never participated in any terrorist action. Why would I?
Well, as an anarchist, you're a big fan of violence and chaos, right?
No, I'm a big fan of peaceful coexistence.
But you're an anarchist. Don't you want to violently overthrow the government?
No, I want people to choose voluntary interaction and stop using what they call government to extort and control each other.
But aren't you hoping for some sort of Mad Max type of existence? Every man for himself?
No, I want people to find voluntary ways to cooperate and organize for mutual benefit, on a voluntary basis without coercion.
But you're an anarchist. Aren't you for survival of the fittest and might makes right?
No, where do you get these ideas? I want people to understand and abide by the non-aggression principle. Never initiate violence against each other on your own or by way of politics. Actually, it's people who advocate government who seem to think that it's okay to control your neighbors as long as you do it by way of law.
But as an anarchist, aren't you against all rules? Don't you want lawless mayhem?
Why would anyone want lawless mayhem? People have moral rules inside their own heads. It's called conscience. I want them to pay attention to that and listen to that instead of doing what politicians tell them to do.
But if everyone just followed his own conscience and moral code, wouldn't we be robbing and attacking and killing each other like wild beasts?
Very few people have a moral code that calls for that. Most people want to live in peace and cooperation. If you look at the large-scale injustices in history, they're all the result of people carrying out the will of authority and government.
Well, okay, I guess what the Nazis did was enacted into law and done in the name of authority and government. And same with the regime of Stalin and Mao and Lenin and Pol Pot and Franco, Saddam, Chavez, Castro, Idi Amin, Chiang Kai-shek, Kim Il-sung, Mussolini, and... But, I mean, if we didn't have some government, wouldn't roving gangs of thugs take over the world?
That's very unlikely. In this country, about 100 million people own guns. The only gang that could extort and control these people is one that they believe has the authority to do so. In other words, government. Any gang that tried to do that by brute force alone would quickly fail.
So do you just trust that everybody would be good and nice if there wasn't government?
Certainly not. There will always be a certain number of sociopathic people in the population. As long as those people are just acting on their own, we can defend ourselves against them. It's when they get into government that they get really dangerous.
But what if your neighbors decide to rob you or control you?
All my neighbors who believe in government already try to rob and control me by way of government, by voting for politicians. In contrast, none of my neighbors have ever tried to rob me on their own because they feel it's wrong. But they imagine it's okay to do it by way of government.
But doesn't the government need to tax you in order to protect you?
Protect me from what? The government has robbed me continually throughout my life. The government has invaded my house and my privacy and imprisoned me, and no one else has. Who are they protecting me from? Government may protect us from a tiny amount of private theft and thuggery, but then it legitimizes theft and thuggery on a huge scale. That's not a good trade-off.
Okay, the government controls and taxes us a lot, but if we didn't have any government, I mean, who would save us from all the nasty people? Wouldn't we be left defenseless?
We're not defenseless. We each have the right to defend ourselves, and we can cooperate to defend ourselves collectively.
But isn't that what government is?
No. A voluntary organization doesn't claim to have any special rights, just the rights that everyone in it has. Governments claim to have rights that the rest of us don't have.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about free market protection companies, but wouldn't private security companies just take over and become the new government?
Throughout history, people have overthrown authoritarian regimes and replaced them with other authoritarian regimes. That's why the answer isn't political, it's philosophical. People have to stop imagining that legal aggression is necessary or legitimate. Once they understand that, no one will be able to control or oppress them again.
So even though you're an anarchist, you don't even want to overthrow the government?
Not really. Too many people still believe in it and depend on it. Overthrowing it would just cause chaos, and it would just be replaced with another one. The problem is in people's heads, and the solution is in people's heads too. Stop believing that government has any authority over you. Stop paying attention to it, and eventually it will cease to exist.
Well, one more thing. On the news, we hear about anarchists breaking things and having violent protests and threatening people. That isn't what you're about?
No. I don't know how much the media exaggerates or just makes up, or how much the government instigates these things just to blame them on anarchists. Society will always have a few destructive punks, but thinking anarchists, also called voluntarists, are not about violence and destruction.
So one can be an anarchist without being a malcontent, bomb-chucking punk?
Yes, of course. People who actually understand the problem know it can't be fixed by breaking windows and yelling slogans. The way to achieve peace and justice is to have people give up the superstitions of government and authority and embrace self-ownership and non-aggression.
So you're not pushing for violent revolution, you just want to change the way people think?
Yes, I just want people to understand that peaceful social coexistence requires a voluntary, stateless society. A world of equals with no masters and no slaves. A world in which you're free to live your own life, spend your own money, make your own choices, and pretty much do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else. That's free and peaceful coexistence.
Well, you're obviously a dangerous, violent, hateful extremist kook, so I'm ending this interview.